Hello, Flouflé! For today's drawing session, I once again decided to draw whatever inspired me on Pinterest. Honestly, I've been really enjoying doing these more spontaneous illustrations lately because they help me stay motivated and experiment more creatively without overthinking everything too much. As usual, I started by sketching traditionally first before importing everything into IbispaintX. The beginning of the piece actually went pretty smoothly overall, which honestly surprised me. Usually there's at least one part of the sketch that completely fights against me from the start, but this time most of the process felt pretty manageable. Well, except for the face. I genuinely kept redoing her expression multiple times because it just wasn't giving the vibe I wanted at first. Sometimes facial expressions are weirdly one of the hardest parts of an illustration because even the tiniest adjustment can completely change how the character looks emotionally. I think I redrew parts of the eyes and mouth several times before finally being satisfied enough to continue rendering. Once I finally fixed the expression, the rest of the illustration started flowing a lot better. The color palette for this piece was honestly pretty limited compared to some of my other drawings, since most of the colors revolved around red tones. While rendering, though, I realized the overall piece was starting to feel a little too monochromatic for my liking. So to fix that, I added a screen layer over the illustration and used soft, blue tones around certain areas to create more contrast and visual interest. I think adding that cooler hue really helped balance out the warmth from the reds and made the piece feel way more atmospheric overall. Lighting layers honestly change the mood of an illustration so much more than people realize. One of my favorite parts while making this piece was definitely rendering the clothing folds. Recently, I've been paying way more attention to fabric folds and textures because I think they make artwork feel more dimensional and alive. Before, I used to simplify clothing a lot because I thought folds were too complicated, but now I actually really enjoy rendering them. I also had a lot of fun drawing the gingham pattern on the bow. I actually drew the pattern manually instead of using any shortcuts because I wanted it to blend naturally with the folds of the fabric. It took a little longer, but honestly, it was really satisfying seeing it come together. I do think some parts of the piece turned out better than others, though. Personally, I don't think the objects were rendered as well as I wanted them to be, but I absolutely love how the clips turned out. I think the rendering and lighting on them came together really nicely, especially once I started adding highlights and texture. This piece ended up taking me around 3.5 hours to finish, which honestly isn't too bad at all. Compared to my previous drawing that took around 5 hours, this one was way shorter despite not even being a simple bust-up illustration, I think. I'm slowly getting faster with rendering while still keeping a decent amount of detail in my artwork. Overall, while this piece isn't necessarily one of my top favorite drawings, I still think it turned out really cute. Not every artwork has to become your absolute best piece ever. And honestly, I think it's important to appreciate drawings even if they're not perfect. I still learned a lot while making this illustration, especially with color balance and rendering textures. That's all for today's drawing session, Flouflés. Thank you so much for watching and supporting my art. Enjoy the rest of the Speedpaint, and I'll see you guys again in the next video. Goodbye.